Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Kuden Radio. Daishihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Of course, you know that. I've got, I almost said Daishihan. Uh, Sensei Alexander in the background. I just said that into the background. He's like, that's funny. We'll make you a Shidoshi ho, though. What do you think? Not that kind of hoe. Relax. Just calm down. All right. So, anyway, all right. So this is our New Year's, not the New Year's episode. This is our end of year episode. There's my dog going nuts in the background. Anyway, so this is the last episode for 2025 for those of you keeping track and following along. And so it's also the third in a three-part end of year transformational series. Okay, so let me start this off. Little story, I guess. It's kind of a story. It's more of a timeline, right? When I first started training in very early 1980s, 1980, right, late 80, early 81, Hatsumi Sensei's teaching looked very different than it did before his retirement. From retirement from physical Taiden teaching. I mean, he's still doing things, right? Just more Kuden and Shinden kind of things. But what I mean by that is, and a lot of you have been around for a long time, and I'm sure you've seen changes. But this is where we have to be careful too, because if we're trying to learn from, let's say, YouTube videos, right, or just we'll call it videos that the Budo winds have sent in one's direction, right? What that means is somebody pirated shit and sent it to it. We can miss a transformational timeline, right? That is normally natural. Hatsumi Sensei himself went through it, right? And I get a chance to watch this. But what I mean by this difference, right, in the beginning, right, way back, and of course he was teaching long before I got on board, but there was more overt demonstration, right? More obvious signs of domination, more visible expressions of NIN the way most people think about it, right? The way I was obviously introduced to it and held on to it for a long time, right? But more specifically, more obvious signs of gaining level ninjutsu, right? Fighting weapons, all kinds of stuff, right? And yet, as the years went on, I'm old. As the years went on, right? Something that I perceived to be strange happened, right? Again, at least from my perspective at the time. And that was there was less and less movement, right? Less effort, less doing, but somehow more power, right? More freedom, more certainty. Okay. At first, that's confusing, especially if you think mastery means adding more tools, more toughness, more endurance. I did. But what I eventually realized was that NIN doesn't mature by becoming harder. It matures by becoming quieter. So in this episode, this is episode 290, this is about transformation. This is about that particular part of transformation. Okay? Not NIN as endurance, not NIN as tolerance, but NIN as mastery. Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about that and more when we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us Concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world. How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to Kuden Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
All right. So, getting started here with episode 290, which means somewhere in the middle of March, right? We're going to be celebrating our 300th episode. That will be cool. But what we're doing with this one is rounding out 2025. So I'm here, right? Tatsujin Miller, and I've got Sensei James Alexander, as usual, in the wings. Feeling much better this week. Apparently last week didn't go so well, but look at that, being resilient and surviving so that he could be the ninja in the background waiting to kill people. Anyway, I don't know what he's doing. Anyway, so all right. So again, welcome. Right, if you're joining us live, if you're watching this on replay, or you're listening in on one of the podcast directories, either way, welcome to this week's year-end episode of Kuden Radio. Right, this episode is intentional. Right, it's not just another training talk. It's not just another concept. I try to not do that anyway, right? But I know that I'm pretty sure that folks that are listening to this one are probably listening to a bunch of other ones as well. As well, you should, right? But again, not just another training talk, not just another concept, not just another discussion about principles or training or whatever, right? It's the closing movement of a three-part transformational arc we've been building deliberately. Okay? Over the past 3 episodes, we've explored NIN from 3 different but inseparable angles. Okay? And together, they form a single progression. Not a technique, right? Not of technique, but a perspective. Okay? So the first episode, right? Not last week, week before that, right? So episode, what was that, 288, right? Addressed NIN at its most accessible level. NIN as survival. Okay? It's what most people are used to. It's what most people read about, experience, are taught, right? It was about how people endure pressure, how they stay standing, how they don't quit when things become uncomfortable. Right? We all know this, right? This is what we're most familiar with. But we came at it from a very specific perspective, right? Bringing Ninpo, however order it needs to, and Mikkyo together, right? Ninpo Mikkyo, right? And we talked about this character Fudo, right? But it's not just a character Fudo, right? But it's a concept Fudo, immovable, right? Hopefully some of you remember, right? And that level is essential, but it's also where many people stop. Again, I know I did for the longest time. I didn't stop training, but it's what I held on to, right? But then last episode, 289, right? That second episode in this series, right, went deeper, and that was about NIN as strategy. Okay? So this was about endurance guided by intelligence, adaptation instead of brute force, and understanding when persistence helps and when it traps you in a loop. Okay, and now during this episode, we're going to complete that arc. We're going to talk about NIN as mastery. Okay? And so if we connect all these, right, to the year, right, to this past year as a whole, okay, what makes this episode different is that it doesn't stand alone. Okay? It draws together many of the lessons we've covered across the entire past year here on Kuden, right? Where we've discussed themes like Fudoshin and immovability in different forms, not just Brett talked about Fudo or Fudoshin. We've talked about Fudoshin, Heijoshin, Zanshin, these different mindsets, right? The difference between endurance and wisdom, understanding the differences between Genin, Chunin, and Jonin level Ninjutsu, right? As well as the true meaning and purpose between the Shoden, Chuden, and Okuden levels in the Ryuha, right? And why kata are not just moves, right? And how they convey and are representations of the principles or concepts at each of those levels. Right? What else have we covered? We've covered why real advantage often feels boring and not like work, right? Why non-participation in somebody's foolishness is sometimes the most devastating response that we could do, that we could give them, right? No response, right? And we've talked about it in different forms why mastery looks like doing less, not more, and the principles that make this happen naturally and silently, quietly. Right? Each of those topics was never meant to be isolated, right? Just like a gem, just like a jewel, right? They are facets of that same jewel. Right? We've got a gem, but there's different cuts, and depending on how we hold it, right, certain things get highlighted, other ones. Okay. So each of those things, right, presented things from a different perspective. Okay. And speaking of which, right, I'd like to hear which episode or lesson really did it for you over the past couple of lessons, couple of months, the past year, or you can even go beyond that. I mean, we're in, who knows what year we're in. I mean, I know what year we're in, but converting this to like how many years we've been doing this, you can do the math knowing that we took a little bit of time off. But either way, right? So let's do this. Think about that for a moment. Right? Which lessons you can even start typing things in. James, let me know here shortly. But there's really a core triad, right, that we're focusing on, right? So at the heart of this year-end series are three interlocking principles: Fudo, Nin, and Tatsujin. And I talked about the Tatsujin in the past. So Fudo is immovability, not rigidity, but clarity that does not get dragged down, doesn't get dragged around, doesn't get manipulated, or unwittingly used and abused. Right? This is the kind of immovability, right, that draws the line and holds it with firm resolve. Right? Nin is adaptability, not tolerance, not having to grit, bear it, put up with, whatever, right? But intelligent non-entanglement, right? Where we're making purposeful choices to not get caught up in shit, right? It is first perceived as the grit and bear it mentality, but it evolves into much more. Tatsujin is what emerges when those two are no longer practiced, but when they're embodied. Okay? So this episode is about that embodiment and about what it means to think, act, and live as a master, quote unquote, a master. Right? So if you're expecting this to be about toughness, it's not. If you're expecting more grit, more grind, more suffering framed as virtue, you may feel a bit disoriented. That's intentional. Because mastery is not the accumulation of strain. Okay? It's the reduction of unnecessary effort. And that's what we're going to be unpacking during this episode, right? step into that first segment in a minute. But before we do that, James, who's on? Who do we have? Who's already checked in?
Well, I got a bunch of people checked in, though. They're saying the audio's coming through on their end with that staticky, choppy. It's the same thing we dealt with, like a month ago?
Yeah.
It started, like, right now you sound clear, but then it'll go back to it.
That's very odd. We're going to have to see if
That's very odd. We're gonna have to see if that
that's coming through a your speaker, right? Yeah. So we're gonna have to see
that's coming through a your speaker, right? Yeah. So we're gonna have to see it.
That's odd. We don't normally deal with that, so that's yeah. Sorry. Anyway, I don't know if it's something in our area as well, because we just had that ice storm come through, and I don't know if that's affecting things or what, but. Sorry, folks. I don't know how to change it on this end.
Sorry, folks. I don't know how to change it.
Well,
At the moment, it's coming through clear, so hopefully it persists. But we got Dave, Kyle, Alan, Jared, Maury, Jimmy, Alyssa, and James T681 said Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
awesome.
Looks like it for the moment.
Does that clear anything up? Does that change anything?
I mean, you still sound clear.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, folks can let us know if there's anything different. I'm just interested in settings over here.
Maury said it sounds clear.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. It's just really weird that's coming out on your end. That doesn't normally, unless you're using something different.
So,
We normally don't get that loop back. Okay, cool. So welcome, everybody. I appreciate it. So, yeah, of course, right? Happy New Year, or Merry Christmas, and Happy Holidays, and whatever does it for you, okay? I'm not somebody that's going to be like jumping down people's throats because you did or didn't say something or whatever, right? You do you, right? Celebrate the way you want. Yeah, because if I got started on like the history of things and whatnot, then I just sound like everybody else is just trying to tear shit down, right? Instead of using it in a way that promotes growth. So, all right. James, did anybody pop in anything about like the lessons or the episodes that like hit hard or worked for them or did it for them? I mentioned that earlier. Anybody pop anything like that in?
I don't see anything in regards to that. No.
Okay. So they're just using Kuden to escape from other shit they don't want to be doing. No.
Could be.
Could be. All right. Fair enough. All right. So is it still clear? Are we still good?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, I got a lot to cover for this one. Again, this is our year-end thing, and I'll talk about what we're going to be doing for the new year next episode. But for now, we will just continue on. Like I said, I've got a lot to cover. Right. So let's begin by looking at the omote side of NIN. Right. I know some listeners that may be new to this or whatnot. There's some Japanese terminology I'm using that is unique to Ninjutsu. It's unique to Japanese martial arts, and it's unique to Japanese language and culture. So I will fill things in as I need to. Okay, and I've already talked about NIN and that omote side. I'll get into that more. Omote means frontal, obvious. It's the primary, like, what things look like, right? Or it's the front facing kind of things, right? Uda, which I'm going to talk about later, Uda is the backside or the hidden side of the same thing, right? So it's actually refers to like the hand, right? So the palm is the omote side of the hand. The back of the hand, right? The hidden side. I'm holding my hands up like this. Again, if you're listening audio only, I've got my palms facing the camera, right? So that's the omote side. The Uda side is the hidden side. The other side, the back side. A sword has an omote side and an Uda side, and it's actually relative to how it's worn in the belt, right? But there is an omote and Uda side, and sometimes reading kata descriptions. Hint, not in English. These things are specified, right? You're using this side of the sword or that side of the sword or whatever. Which is one of the things I'm really liking about some of the books that are just recently out. When I say recently, I mean in the context of probably the last couple of years, where if it was done by Hatsumi Sensei, the English translation's there, but so is the original Japanese manuscript, okay, or the original, the actual Japanese of how it's written in the scrolls, like the kata and whatnot. Very different, okay? Not different. People, the English is summarized enough that people can get a start, but there's some nuances there that often get missed. The Yoyu book by e290 Sensei that James Sensei was gracious enough to gift me for Christmas, which I really appreciate. It too, right, has the English translation, but the original Japanese manuscript is also there as well, which I can't wait to dig into. Not that I am a fluent Japanese reader or anything like that. Right? A lot of the AI and stuff can now do some of this stuff, but it also gives me something interesting to help with my Japanese study instead of like, my pen is yellow and other nonsensical bullshit that you would never use in a conversation. So also the same reason that I will run some Hatsumi Sensei's Japanese the videos, right? The training videos that are in Japanese, and I'll close my eyes when it comes to not looking at the subtitles. Most of my stuff actually is pre-subtitled, so it makes it easier to listen. And then there's not an English translator, in the dojo speaking and whatnot. But I can listen for things and it helps me build my vocabulary and things like that. But anyway, so again, as usual, right? If you're getting value out of this, out of Kuden, on whatever platform you're on, whether it's one of the audio directories, the podcast directories like Spotify or iHeartRadio, Pandora, where else are we? We're on all of them. Or you're checking in via YouTube or Facebook, whatever, right? Whatever platform you're on, just do us a favor of liking, sharing, subscribing, whatever, right? Helps us get the word out more. Okay. All right. Anyway, speaking of this, omote, the omote side of NIN, right? Like a lot of lessons, it's necessary, but it's incomplete. Okay. I'm going to talk about a lot about this incompleteness as we go through this episode. Okay. We have to be careful that we don't take a snapshot or a current level of training as being the thing. Okay. So most people only ever encounter the outer face of NIN, right? The endurance, the perseverance, the ability to push through, right? That keep going kind of thing, right? This version of NIN looks noble. That's what drew me in, right? It looks strong. And at the beginning, it's absolutely necessary, right? You need resilience to survive training, right? Without it, you're either going to be quitting or you're going to be picking and choosing what's comfortable. Yes, okay? What skills, right? Whatever, okay? You need perseverance to weather adversity, right? Or you'll expect, like a lot of people, right? you're going to end up expecting the world being made easier. But that's not what Ninjutsu was built for. Okay, you need the ability to stay upright when life applies pressure, to keep going in spite of the storms, the chaos, the drama. Okay, but here's the problem: if Nin stops at this endurance, at this almost a level, it becomes suffering with better posture. This is where people confuse toughness with mastery. Right? They admire struggle. They romanticize hardship. They mistake constant resistance for virtue. Okay? And I can see how that is or has been made popular by different lessons we might get along the way, right? Because this isn't just a martial problem. It shows up in religion, it shows up in leadership programs, in business, and especially when it comes to things like compassion. In both Buddhism and Christianity, right? That's where most of my references lie. That and Buddha, of course, right? And while I have studied Hinduism and Jainism and a bunch of other isms, right? Most of my reference points are here, right? But in those two, and we can see it in the lineages, we can see it in Budo across lineages, not just the ones that are in the Buddhism kind, right? In Buddhism and Christianity, right? There are very clear warnings about this thing, about not confusing. I'm going to borrow compassion for a moment because this is one of those things that really get in the way, right? Later I'm going to talk about another one that really slows people down, if not just stops them in their tracks. But this is one of those things where when we're talking about lessons coming across, and they're correct and they're necessary, but they're incomplete if we're not careful, right? Or at least the introductory lesson is incomplete. Compassion's way up there. Okay? But in these traditions, in these lineages, right, there are very, very clear warnings about not stopping, not getting caught up in this thing, because done to an extreme, it can be just as damaging as the thing we're trying to overcome or rise above. Okay? So here's where I'm coming from. Serious practitioners, right? Even priests, monks, devoted followers, whatever, right? When it comes to compassion, they often stop at this niceness, right? They translate compassion as being nice, being kind. And it's not that that's not a part of it, but right, it's not the thing. It's not the whole thing, right? And the reason they stop at niceness is because it feels morally satisfying. Right? I'm a good person, so these are the things, right? Compassion means that's not in the books, right? Okay, because we're talking about compassion, contrary to popular belief, right? Compassion has nothing to do with being nice. Compassion has everything to do and is about giving someone what they need to move forward and to grow. Okay? It is sensing a need and providing that thing. Could it be nice? Could it be kindness? Sure. But it's right. It's not limited there. But in today's world and throughout history, in these different realms, again, moral virtue or other things. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about for a minute here, right? These other things. I have friends who are in several realms. And this is not about tearing anybody down or anything like that, right? But I need to highlight this because this is very, very important to what we're doing and where we're going. Okay? I have friends in several realms: Buddhist, Judeo-Christian, and Buddha, who routinely side with whatever ideology or story is about the victim, helping the victim, right? Avoiding or pulling people out of victimhood, or avoiding brash speaking people because that somehow makes them bad by default, or siding with well-spoken people regardless of the message because, well, see, that makes them they're well-spoken, they're soft, and they sound kind, so therefore they're good. See, but the texts themselves say that stopping there is incomplete and sometimes dangerous for both the receiver of the help and the one giving the help. Right? Again, this is not a religious thing. This is not a political thing. This is not a philosophical thing. I'm discussing this because we have to get this to get some of these other things that are a part of mastery. Right? And I've been talking about this stuff for years, right? That the way we define anything, it's not that it won't get us somewhere, but it's an expedient at best. And we have to be careful to not take it to be the whole thing. Hatsumi Sensei, from the earliest stages, the earliest days when I was learning, right, talked about Ninjutsu being a 40-year cycle. The first 20, which by the way includes your childhood. Not all of us got things in the normal context of the cycle. But the first 20 years, you're looking at the omote of things, right? Goodness and fairness and, right, compassion is nice and kind and all that. But that's not the end of things, right? We have to complete the other side. We have to study the Uda, the darkness, right? What causes people to lash out? What causes violence? We have to look into that realm. Okay, but this shows up all over the place. Okay? He's also said that one has not mastered a weapon, no matter how good somebody gets with it, no matter how good that person gets with it. That's still not mastery until they have learned the disadvantages of a weapon and how to defeat it. Then they haven't mastered it. They have to know both sides. But we've come to believe, mostly because we've been taught and programmed to only look at one side of things. Okay, so let me get back to my references here, right? Because this was shocking to me in the beginning, right? When I got lessons from Reverend Jikai and really started to look into this stuff, that it was not, it was not what I thought it was. Okay, this idea of not. It's not always about being nice, okay? But it is about getting growth and movement and those kind of things, right? In Buddhism, right? In Mikkyo, it shows up clearly in the teachings on slothfulness, right? Laziness, right? Physical and spiritual, right? Because compassion without wisdom becomes indulgence. Okay, we're just giving somebody something so that they'll feel better. Okay. Kindness without clarity becomes enabling. Okay? Even the Buddha repeatedly warned against helping in ways that reinforce ignorance, attachment, or harmful behavior. Okay? And that's why certain people are explicitly said, right? It's explicitly said to not help, to not, they're not to receive help. Not because they're unworthy, but because help would deepen the very causes of their suffering. Okay? And even in temples and monasteries, if one does not work, if one does not practice or help others, right? They don't eat. No excuses. Okay? This is not a free ride. Okay? Real compassion sometimes withholds. It allows consequence. I'm talking about that a lot here coming up. Right? It lets karma finish the lesson when teaching has failed. People can be surrounded by the teachings. They can know all the lessons. Still not practice. Still not do the work. Right? Still not. Right? They're looking for that next video lesson, that next technique demonstration, that next book to read, that next way, but they're not. That doesn't work. Right? And so, yeah. Anyway, to balance this out, right, to make sure that it's not just like one-sided, right? Because I have mentioned some of these things, and people go, "I'll see in my religion or my ideology or my right that doesn't happen." Yeah, well, see, I think that people need to stop relying on the readings that other people do, and they need to read things cover to cover. Okay, because Christianity says the same thing, although it's often ignored. Okay, the New Testament itself repeatedly warns against enabling slothfulness or laziness, warns against enabling irresponsibility, deception, and anger under the general banner of love. Okay, there are explicit instructions that those who refuse responsibility, correction, or right action are not to be supported in their behavior. Okay? Not as punishment, but because indulgent mercy destroys both the giver and the receiver. Okay? Even Christ refused to intervene when intervention would prevent transformation. And again, this is not a religious thing. Okay? I'll get to Budo here in a bit. Okay? So niceness is not holiness. And compassion that avoids truth, it's not love. Okay? So it's enablement, it's a whole bunch of other things that are not that thing. Okay? And here's the big thing. Sometimes helping those who will otherwise be enabled squander the help or take it for granted, or even hanging out with those who are deceitful and angry can do us harm. Not because it drains us of energy, focus, and resources that could be better placed, which it does, right? But because whether we know it or not, we run the risk of becoming just like the one we're helping. Right? We can end up running out of energy and not being able to do anything. Right? We can become angry and resentful because, like, I'm helping and they just squander it, or they won't listen. Okay? So this is very important, right? This is why NIN cannot stop at the omote, at the obvious things, the endurance everyone thinks of, right? And are often taught to stick to. Right? Endurance, perseverance, right? Without wisdom, just creates a better trained victim. And compassion without discernment creates dependency, not liberation. Okay? The Buddha side of NIN begins exactly where nice ends. Okay? Not because it lacks care, but because it understands consequence. Okay? Cause and effect. Okay? There's nothing that we can think, say, or do, put it in motion, that does not produce very specific effects. Even though the human being always tries to avoid that from happening. So, every tradition warns us. Helping at the wrong time is harm wearing a halo. Okay? And again, many followers and teachers of systems stop here because it feels morally satisfying. Okay? Makes us feel good. But stopping here is incomplete. Okay? And the actual traditions teach to go beyond it. Okay? It's not my opinion. This is from reading several versions of the Bible cover to cover, reading text from all over the place, reading from the different lineages, reading Hatsumi Sensei's book on Gyoko Ryu is out, Hatsumi Sensei's deepest stuff. I know that these things are not in the chapters that have technique demonstrations or technique descriptions, which is, somehow the collecting of techniques and the more techniques we know somehow has come to mean mastery. But again, something else I'll talk about here in a bit. Okay. So, James, any comments or questions come through at this point before I jump into the Buddha side of Nin?
No, just Kyle thought maybe the mic issues because they started again as soon as you brought up your notes. He said he thought it might be creating some kind of conflict.
Really?
Yeah, because now you're clear again.
Some windows here.
Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. I'm gonna bring them up again. Is the feedback still going on?
It just started again. It was clear.
Really? Let's see what I can make happen here. Like, what is the feedback like on your side?
What is the feedback like on your side when I bring the notes?
Does it skip? Is it unintelligible?
Does it skip? Is it
unintelligible? It's that staticky, choppy thing. We had it once before, about a month or two ago. And it was only for like an episode, and then we just thought it was a weird fluke thing because it didn't repeat itself till now. Victor calls it gargles, is what it sounds like.
It's happening now, then, I'm assuming.
Now it is, yes.
All right. I am clearing some things here to see if that maybe helps. As a matter of fact, let me close that out. I appreciate the help and people telling me that this stuff is going on. I have a lot of projects open here, and maybe if I clear these things out, I can make that all change. Japanese language lessons, all kinds of crap and zeal. All right. All right, it should be gone now, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So let me try bringing my notes up again a different way. All right, is it back?
It sounded like it a little bit.
A little bit.
No, yeah, I hear it now.
You hear it?
Yes.
Let me change my mic back. I changed it off to something else, but let's see. That's not that. This one. All right. Let's see. The heck? Sorry. How about now? What's it like now?
Still static.
Yeah, people are just not very helpful. Hold on a second.
Hold on a second.
I'm gonna go through a couple of mics. How about that? Anything different?
Sounds clear now.
How about now? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Hear me out.
Ken, it sounds like it might be there a little bit. It's got a delay to it, the video to the sounds.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's try one more.
That's clear right there.
That's clear, but I'm not on the
That's
tree.
clear, but I'm not on the tree.
How about now?
Sounds like it should be okay.
Let me get rid of noise suppression,
Noise suppression.
echo cancellation, all kinds of weird shit here. Let's see. All right, how about now? How are we doing?
We got quieter.
Testing one.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
It's static now. Static and quieter.
All right, let me do this. I'm gonna. If I back out and
If I back out and
resign
resign back in,
will the recording still be
will the recording still be right?
It should be. I think so. Now you got
in
an
case I have to
echo.
restart.
In that case, I'm going to restart things on my end.
Okay.
All right. Are we still running? Can you hear me?
Yes, we're good.
Okay.
Okay.
And let me do a little test here. How about now? Are things still clear?
Yeah, sure, clear.
Excellent. All right. Well, seems like I had to clear the system. All right. So, how is everyone? Questions, comments, anything? James, hopefully you're going to be able to edit this. That little chunk out of there.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. All right. Something wrong with my speakers now. You're sounding very muffled. All right. Can you hear me okay? Nothing changed? Everything's good?
We're good.
Awesome. All right. So, any questions, comments, anything other than the sound issues?
No, nothing yet.
All right, cool. All right. So, let's take a look at the Buddha side of Nin, right? Ending cycles without entering them. What the hell does that mean? Right? So, the deeper aspect of Nin, right? The Ura side is not about enduring. It's not about this putting up with cycles, right? What I mean by that, the Sanskrit word for samsara, right, which people often mistake as the hell of like Buddhism and Hinduism and stuff like that. We've got nirvana, right, and we have samsara, right. It doesn't work that way, right. Just like karma doesn't mean all this crap that people have stacked on top of it, like it's destiny or fate or whatever, right? Just like karma means action, and it implies cause and effect, right? Samsara means to go around very much. Okay, think about like being on a Ferris, or not a Ferris wheel, well, it could be, but a merry-go-round you can't get off of, that kind of thing, right? Or as people would say today, same shit, different day. Okay, that kind of feeling. Right? So this deeper Ura side is not about enduring or putting up with the same shit the same way, right? Just gritting and bearing it, different faces, different locations, same drama, same choices, same outcomes, that kind of thing. It's not about that. It's about ending them. Okay? But not through force, not through domination. Right? But through understanding the structure of the cycle itself, right? How is it created? What's making it happen? Okay. I remember as a kid, hopefully there's still freaking playgrounds out there with these things on them, because this is what created some of us, right? These merry-go-rounds that we would sit on, and then somebody, one or more of your friends, would be off of it, grabbing these bars and pushing, and then, and that's how it happened. If somebody stopped doing that, the merry-go-round slowed down and eventually stopped. And then somebody either had to stay on it and put their leg over the side, push off the ground to get it moving or whatever. But the point here is that the merry-go-round spins, and we keep going around and around and around and seeing the same shit over and over and again, because somebody's pushing. Somebody's doing something that makes that happen. Okay? If we don't do those things, then the cycle can't continue. Okay? And so here's the not the irony. Here's the counterintuitive thing, right? When we stop applying force, we stop looking to dominate something or control things, right? And we start looking to understand the nature of what causes these things, right? This is where Nin stops looking impressive to people who are addicted to struggle. Okay? Real advantage feels boring to those who equate meaning with stimulation. Right? Life has meaning because, right? There's purpose, there's struggle, there's, okay? So what do I mean by this, right? What I mean, well, let's look at this from a different perspective, right? I mentioned when I was talking about compassion, I'd be talking about something else that is just the bane of existence for a lot of martial artists and people on the self development path. And that's motivation. Okay? And this is where people misunderstand motivation. Most people don't actually mean motivation when they use the word. Wait. Sensei, what the hell are you talking about, right? I do mean it. When I say I don't feel motivated, right? Or I do feel motivated, right? That's exactly what I mean. No, it's not what they mean. Okay? when people use the word motivation, more often than not, what they mean is stimulation. Okay? They don't actually mean, I don't feel motivated. Right? What they mean is something, or the way I'm thinking about it, is not stimulating me in a way that makes me feel good enough to do or continue doing this thing. Okay? This is, again, not opinion. Neuroscience is very clear about this. Okay? The brain is wired to seek dopamine, not meaning. Okay? Dopamine isn't the chemical of fulfillment. I have my daughter Trinity in the room here, and this is where her degree lies and whatnot. Not in the brain science and chemistry, but in the psychology that comes out of these neurochemical, electrical storms and chemical things and whatnot, right?
Spicy brain meat.
What's that?
Spicy brain meat.
Spicy brain meat. Okay, so again, neuroscience is very clear about this, right? Dopamine, that's our feel-good chemical, right? That's not about fulfillment, right? Dopamine is the chemical of anticipation, of novelty, and emotional charge, right? Someone says, I don't feel motivated. What they're really saying is, I don't feel stimulated, right? Thinking about this thing or engaging in this thing or whatever is not firing this chemical that I'm literally getting high off of. She's over here nodding her head, right? It's a feel-good drug chemical or a brain drug, right? That we create and that gets triggered under certain conditions based on how we think about things. Yeah. Or how we might be stimulated externally to internally, because it can work in both directions. Okay? So most people are confusing motivation with this high, right? This thing, what they're really saying is, like, not just I don't feel stimulated. What they're saying is, this thing or the thought of this thing I need to do doesn't excite me, right? They focus on the necessary task rather than the outcome that it will produce or contribute to, okay? Because, well, we can also equate this with other chemicals too, like the stress chemicals and cortisol and those kind of things, right? The things that trigger fight, flight, or freeze, okay? Because if somebody says, I'm not feeling motivated to train, but if I were to say, you feeling motivated to get your face punched into the back of your skull, okay? Or if somebody showed up to do that, well, those chemicals would fire, okay? Or what about if you thought about, not about the thing that you have to do because this is necessary, but if you got your head off of that and got it wrapped around all the cool shit you'll be able to do to somebody that jumps up on you, or what your life would be like, right, when you have these skills, and not like just intellectually thinking about it, but thinking about, like, what would you be able to do? What would you not have to put up with? Okay? What would absolutely not be a part of that perfect life? What would absolutely be a part of that perfect life? Okay? And then Fudo would be standing at that threshold, making sure that, like, nobody crossed that line. Right? You held the line. That's what I talked about 2 episodes ago. Okay? So, again, when you hear someone say or imply, I'm not motivated, right? Focus on what's behind that phrase and not the phrase itself. Okay? We all need to do this. Yes, I do. Everybody needs to do it. Okay? It just happens to us differently at different times. Okay? But because we take somebody at their word, because of the word they're using, right? We think we need to motivate them, but usually what that ends up doing is causing resistance and resentment and all kinds of other shit, or it just doesn't compute because what quote unquote motivates us or does it for us is probably not the thing that does it for them, right? As a matter of fact, and coincidentally, this is part of what Trinity's covering during her breakout session at the upcoming Daikomyosai, right? You're covering personality characteristics, traits.
Yeah, the big five personality.
The big five personality traits. And part of it's for clarity, right? How people can identify what theirs is so they can stick closer to those things.
Or so they can.
But they can
find
also
where
shift.
they're lacking and where they want to be.
Yeah.
And
So.
how to build towards that.
Right. And so I don't know if you heard that through the mic or whatever, but how they're lacking and how they can grow toward it, right? Just other words for things we talk about, like in Mikkyo and Ninpo and whatnot. But also, I think she's going to cover it from the perspective. And again, her presentation is going to be very summarized. It'll be like last time where people end up like downloading.
You'll get documents.
You'll get documents. Yeah.
You'll get homework.
So, but also, like if you had to operate in and around people that the personality traits that they lead with are different, extrovert, introvert, that kind of thing, right? And how to make that happen, right? And so this falls under not just Henso Jutsu and but also like the Ninja no Uge, right? Influence and how to get what you want, right? How to make things, how to get the results that you're looking for easier, better, right? Okay, so. Anyway, James, how are we doing on sound? Everything is still better?
Yes, sounds still clear.
Okay, cool. All right. So again, that sounded weird. So again, I apologize for these glitches that we're having. It's just not always. Technology's great when it works. Let me get back over here to something I changed over earlier. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. All right. Am I still doing okay?
Yes.
Ashley, is the system and technology still doing okay? I'm fine.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, questions, comments, anything from anyone?
Alyssa said she was driving earlier and couldn't answer, but she liked the Ukemi episode you did recently.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Alyssa. All right, so I'm always glad to... happy to hear when these things are helping, and also, you know, if there's something that not being clear about, or if there's a lesson or some topic that you wouldn't want me to cover, you can always drop it in the comments on the platform that you're on, or you can send an email to us. We'll pop all that stuff in later, or you can probably find it on the platform that you're on. Okay. So anyway, let me get back to things because again, got a lot. Okay, so this is an advantage, right? I mean, the more advantages we can stack up for ourselves, the greater our chances of success, right? So, but here's a question, right? Why does advantage, from this perspective, right? Why does this feel boring, right? So again, we can look to neuroscience. Real advantage removes uncertainty. Think about this, right? The techniques, the strategies, the tactics, the lessons that we're learning is to give us advantages and to give us skill sets that produce the same or better results with less effort. They're designed to remove uncertainty, to level out or help us make sense of chaos. Those kind of things, right? So, again, removes uncertainty, reduces chaos. By its very nature, it lowers emotional spikes. And the brain, especially a brain conditioned by stress, by struggle, constant stimulation, right? That brain interprets that new condition as emptiness, because there's nothing to fight against. There's nothing, right? which to that brain can feel like boredom. It can feel like loneliness. It can even feel like depression. No adrenaline, no dopamine, no drama, no heroic or victim struggle. Right? So it feels like nothing is happening, even when everything is under control. Okay? Just because it feels like nothing is happening doesn't mean that nothing is happening. Right? We've talked about this in the past with watching a teacher demonstrate a technique and then trying to reproduce the same thing based only on what we think we saw from the angle and perspective that we're looking at it from, based on our level of understanding about what's going on. But there's so much that we can't see. Okay? We have no idea what that teacher is looking for, what they're looking out at, what they're recognizing, right? What they're controlling. There's so much that we can't see, especially when we're only focused on the mechanics, right? So it just looks like the teacher's standing there and waiting for the attack to happen. But there's so much that they're doing to set up, control, and prepare in a way that the attack has already failed before the person even punches. And that's something that can't be learned in a simple Taiden physical technique demonstration. So it looks like the teacher is doing nothing, even when the teacher is just... Right. What's that phrase that I learned as a white belt and I bring up every once in a while? The ninja takes control from the attacker long before the attacker ever realizes that he lost it. That's a lot of doing from somebody who looks like they're not doing anything but waiting for the punch to happen. Okay? But we see different things at different levels based on where we are, based on our time in training, based on our perspective, based on our own skill set. Okay? So, something to think about, right? Let's go back a little bit and talk about this conditioning and what I'm going to call addiction to struggle. Okay? Addiction to drama, addiction to chaos. Okay? And again, we're still in a neuroscience thing. Okay? That's the cool thing about training in this art today, that we've got so many aspects of science proving that this stuff works, but also helping us by being able to explain why it works, and not just, I'm going to do it the traditional way. But like those people, what's really cool to me is that our past masters discovered this stuff, but they didn't have words to put to it, or the words they did put to it don't sound very scientific. And so the brain can play with them because they sound abstract. But in today's world, we've got like lots of studies and lots of scientific, brain maps and all kinds of things that tell us why, right? And one of those things points to this very thing, this conditioning and this, what ends up being addiction. Right? We just don't need external drugs to do it. Because over time, the nervous system can become conditioned to specific emotional states. Right? One of the videos I used to recommend highly to students is something called "What the Bleep Do We Know?" And if you watched it, watch it again. If you've never watched it, watch it and then watch it again and again and again. The cool thing about this movie is it's it's two things happening at the same time. It's a scientific documentary about this very thing that I'm talking about, and a scripted movie line, a story about this woman who's having, like, life is crashing around and, you know, chaos and all that kind of stuff, and taking control of it so that things change, right? But what the bleep do we know? So it's just fucking brilliant, right? Anyway, so again, the system can become conditioned to specific emotional states, right? The things that we might find ourselves in a lot, right? Conflict, urgency, pressure, resistance, right? The brain literally builds faster pathways, shortcuts to those states. The human system is very, very adaptable, and it will adapt itself to get to those states that we're in most often faster. Okay? And this isn't just the brain doing it, right? All the cells in the body, okay? When they subdivide, right? They make sister cells. I've got weird hobbies. Right? But they literally create new cells with receptors for those specific peptides, emotional transmitters, that allow us to get where we always go faster. Right? So if you're somebody that gets angry often or hangs out with people who make you angry, your body eventually adapts to getting to anger faster. Same thing with all these other things. Come over here. Actually, I'll turn the mic. Say it louder.
Neurocognitive homeostasis.
Did that come across, James?
Yes.
There you go. The scientist speaking out. Right? So what this means is that some people are not motivated by progress. They're regulated by struggle at a subconscious, unconscious, and cellular level. This process, this system, I don't care what you call it, needs to... we're talking at the Ninpo level now, because this is not just about fighting. It's the reason behind it. You can't make that go away without removing the people who are pushing on the fucking merry-go-round to make it continue to spin. Okay? Take the struggle away for these folks that are regulated by struggle or urgency or whatever it is, right? Take the struggle away, and they feel lost. They feel flat. They feel unmoored, right? Even bored, lonely, depressed. Okay? So they recreate problems. Not because they want pain. Not because they want frustration. Not because they want urgency. Not because they want the drama. But because their nervous system doesn't yet know how to live without it. Okay? That's why I use that word. Because it sounds like the definition of addiction, doesn't it? It's because it is. Okay? So, again, coming back to NIN, right? This is why mastery looks unimpressive to people addicted to intensity. This is why people constantly slam videos online about things not looking like they would work, and you can't stand there with somebody rushing at you and those kind of things, right? Because NIN, this condition, right? This ability at depth doesn't spike emotion. It stabilizes it. It doesn't excite the nervous system. It frees it. Not freezes it, it frees it. And to someone still equating meaning with stimulation, that freedom feels boring. Right? They will go out of their friggin' way to cause stimulation that will set the freaking merry-go-round in motion again. Until they realize it's the first moment they can finally choose, they'll keep going around very much. Right? But here's the thing. Boring, what people call boring, right, where nothing is going on, is freedom. They're not stuck on a cycle. They're not stuck on a pathway. They're not chained to a condition or state in life or in the moment or whatever. Right? Right? It's freedom because you're no longer compelled to react. You're no longer trapped. Right? This reminds me of a saying we have in the bodyguard world. A boring day is a good day. Okay? Because nothing happened. Nothing required. Defensive, offensive, aggressive action. Right? Caveman, not die today. Reactivity. That's right, Trin. Ooh. Right? So this is why NIN, at its highest level, Ninpo, at this level, does not escalate. It dissolves. Okay? It removes fuel. It refuses participation. It lets consequences teach when instruction fails. Okay? Without ego, without I told you so. Right? I'll talk about that here in a bit. Right? This isn't weakness. Right? You know that saying? Don't confuse kindness with weakness. Right? Don't confuse. It's like children confusing the fact that their parents' eyeballs are not on them with the fact that their parents aren't paying attention to them. Except when they go to put their hand on the cookie jar, the parent goes, "What are you doing?" And the eyeballs are still not pointing in their direction. Right? The parent's doing a lot. They're paying attention. They're monitoring. They're watching. But to the child, to that mind, if they're not looking at them, then they're not seeing. They're not paying attention. They're not processing. And this is why struggling to get to mastery by doing more, collecting more, struggling more, working out harder, faster, whatever, right, doesn't produce mastery. It produces burnout. It produces frustration. It produces arrogance. It produces all kinds of things. Because that person is in a game of contest. Okay? So this isn't weakness. This is strategic restraint. And that's not nothing. That's proactive. Strategic restraint. Okay? Calm isn't absence of meaning. It's absence of noise. Okay. Any comments or questions, James? I'm obviously continuing to check here, but
Just Dave said a lot of artists fall under this concept.
yeah, cool. Right. So let me get back to this "I told you so" phrase. Right? I don't use that phrase. Ever. Did I ever? Sure. Okay. But I don't use that phrase. My students in the dojo have heard this on a regular basis, right? Like somebody will make a mistake or they'll come in and go, they'll tell me about this thing and they'll go, I know. You know, you're going to say I told you so. And what do I say, Trin?
I'm not gonna say that.
I don't need to say it.
You
Okay.
already know it.
Okay. Again, a student can come in the dojo, right? Learn a lesson the hard way. Look at me, come back to class and say, whatever, right? I know what you're going to say. I told you so, right? And I tell them, one, I don't need to. We both know I said it. And two, people who use that phrase are typically doing it to rub salt in a wound, right? You already feel bad enough on your own. I don't need to, nor do I feel the need to make your pain worse. That's not my job. Okay? But that's not all. There's another reason that I never use the phrase "I told you so." Right? It's not a teaching tool. It's an ego signal. That phrase doesn't improve learning. It doesn't deepen understanding. Okay? It doesn't prevent the mistake from happening again. The only function that the phrase "I told you so" serves is to reclaim or reassert status after someone else has fallen. And what it does is it shifts the moment from insight to compliance. And the truth is, when someone fails after being warned, the lesson has already landed. Right? Pain plus recognition creates imprint on the system. Okay? And adding shame only interferes with that process. Okay? It interferes with the planting of the lesson on the nervous system. Okay? And the other thing it does is it serves to make the person who said it feel superior. Okay? Instructors who use that, parents who use it, leaders who use it, run the risk of having people become compliant robots, not critical, strategic thinkers, which is what we're supposed to be becoming. Okay? And what this ends up creating is a paradigm or a conflict of learning versus dominance. Right? That moment right after failure is sacred. Not religiously, right? This is science. Still talking about science, right? The person who made that mistake, right? Who might even be expecting to hear, "I told you so," right? That person is already reviewing, recalibrating, and correcting themselves internally. If you pile that on with, "See, next time listen, I told you," whatever, right? If you do that, you hijack the process and make it about you. Not you, because you guys are enlightened, right? I remind you of this all the time, right? But you hijack the process, right? The person who's saying "I told you so" makes it about them. It makes it about their superiority, their authority, or their righteousness. Not about the lesson. Okay? And I know, like, I know I'm doing these Kudens. I know I do the Whiteboard Wednesdays, and I know how brains can process this stuff. Okay? But I am not interested in being right. Please remember that there is a huge difference between rightness, appropriate for the moment, the context, the conditions, and righteousness. Right? The need to be right and make sure everybody knows it. Okay? I'm not interested in being right. I'm interested in removing ignorance and letting reality do its work. And that is hugely different. Okay? I do this in the dojo. I do it with family. Trent, how many times have you heard me, like if you guys, and I'll talk about this later, right? If it's not going to hurt you, at a certain point, especially for teenagers, right? The lessons have been taught. But sometimes what has to happen is they have to bump into reality so they can learn the lesson. So how many times have you heard me say, "I support you in your decision"? I don't know if you can hear her giggling or not, right? Or I would even tap a non-existent watch and go tick, 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 right? When they were coming up on, it had nothing to do with like, "I want you to move out" or anything like that. It was like, pretty soon you're going to be 18 and you get to test your belief system against reality, right? Those kind of things. But if it wasn't going to do actual physical harm, sometimes, right? I'll talk about how I do that in the dojo here in a minute. But there's a point where the spoken lesson ends, and it's time to let reality, the scheme of totality, universal justice, whatever you want to call it, right, do its thing. Okay? So again, I'll talk about letting consequences teach in a bit, right? But for now, just landing on anybody. Did anybody get this, right? Did you have a parent, leader, teacher, whatever, use the same kind of thing? Or do you get what I'm talking about with this I told you so thing actually hijacks a student or a learner or a person's natural learning mechanism and takes it out of the realm of learning and imprinting the lesson that will allow for better strategic thinking, system or situational assessment and things like that, and removes it from that and turns it into a compliance thing. As a matter of fact, Trin, you and I were talking about that earlier. Come closer over here so people, you know, I'll turn it this way. Hopefully everybody can hear this. We were talking about this earlier when we were talking about how teenagers can be out on their own, or young 20-somethings or whatever, right? And they're living on their own, and they confuse that with independence, but they're actually running, how'd you describe that earlier? They're actually running learned programs, right? This is how you do it right?
Right. They're not acting of their own accord. They're moving of their own will. There's a difference. They themselves decide to, or their own bodies are carrying out the actions, but it's based on decisions they have been told are right and proper for how you live your life. They have made no decisions.
Through passive or aggressive punishment, whatever, right?
Or just, faith in your authority figures. This is how you do this thing. Okay. And so you do that for the rest of your life, non-questioning, non-understanding, just doing.
But that is not independent strategic thinking and assessment of situations. That's being stimulated by the right cues and clues that runs the program.
That's solo playing the game of life. That's not writing the game.
There you go. Yeah. So that's from a master. Or I have somebody with a master's degree and all this stuff. I don't have any degrees. I'm just, I came at this School of Hard Knocks.
Two different things.
What's that? A master and a master's degree. Two different things. And that is wisdom right there. That is absolute wisdom. Just like, and Hatsumi Sensei has always pointed this stuff out, right? Don't confuse what you know and what you understand with your belt color or the rank or whatever, okay? And this is in Mikkyo we talk about the two different sides of the mandala, right? The intellectual wisdom side, you've learned this stuff. But the other side, which is often called the compassion side, and again, this is what confuses people. Confused me for a long time. Like, this is the experiential knowledge side of the mandala. How the hell does that match up with compassion? Because I saw compassion as niceness and heart and stuff like that. But it's reality teaching the lesson, and it's not always nice. So you have book smarts and you have street smarts. And when those two match up, then we can apply wisdom and practical experience and things like that to produce results. But if what we have is wisdom, and what the School of Hard Knocks taught you was compliance and obedience to that authority and that wisdom, whatever, right? Then you don't have completeness. What you have is you're just following dictates. You're just following those kind of things. Now, what a lot of people do is they'll hack that and fuck all that stuff over there. I'm just going to go and do my own thing. And then they don't understand why life's not working out because they don't have a basis to work from and a testing mechanism where reality will thump them around, right? Because there's times that, just like in Mikkyo, right, we have frameworks that we learn, but life is the laboratory, right? And what you end up learning at the end of the path, and I risk people faking this, ego faking this, because it doesn't want to go through the process. That's like people, wanting to move like sensei and the master teachers and sounding like them without going through the process. Okay. But what you end up at the end realizing is that the framework that you learned, sometimes the opposite is actually true. Like sometimes right speech is silence. Okay. Sometimes right speech is telling somebody to fuck off. Okay. Yeah, but they're now going to be mad at you, and yeah, I know, but that's their karma. Okay. Yeah, but no. We tried nice. This isn't about winning or losing a fight or an argument. This is about making the disturbance, the chaos, the damage, whatever, stop. Coldly, quickly, and cleanly. This is why people often confuse self-defense with fighting. And while on the outside, to an observer, these two things can look the same, on the inside, the intent and variables that created the condition that they can see are completely different. I don't know if I have it in my notes at the moment, but if it's in there, I'll get back to that. But I talk about this on a regular basis, right? Hatsumi Sensei has said this. I say it. All the master teachers say it. We do not teach fighters, and we do not teach fighting. And that is one of the biggest things that confuses people, because they confuse the training with fight training and not protective last option to stop the damage, to stop the chaos, right? Quickly, efficiently, effectively, right? There are no 2-minute or 5-minute multiple rounds. There is no winning or losing at the end. There is, at one level of NIN, surviving. At another level of NIN, creatively manipulating a situation to shift the balance of power. And who said that earlier? Somebody used a phrase. Did you say that? There was something we were talking about with, it was one of Gibbs' rules, right? If the other person has the upper hand, break it. Right? So, right, but it's not about a fight. It's to neutralize that condition, right? And to a jonin, it's to never let it happen to begin with. And so if and when it does, it has failed before it got launched, because the jonin is controlling so many things and looking like they're doing absolutely nothing. At the geinin level of training, the geinin is the one everybody fantasizes about, right? Climbing walls, disappearing in a puff of smoke, sword fighting, all that kind of stuff, right? But it's the greatest risk of shit going wrong and you dying and not being able to protect anybody ever again. Being a geinin is being a pawn. It's about overt struggle. Chunin level ninjutsu is about paying attention to things, recognizing connections, right? And developing plans of action. Okay? To a jonin, it's paying attention to the long game. It's watching actions and interactions and subtly influencing those things while looking like you did absolutely nothing at all. And that is what Hatsumi Sensei has been teaching. But again, you watch the transition, because what created the ninja boom and what drew all these people to ninjutsu? Geinin level training. But he always called it like panning for gold. You run as many people through the process as possible, and hopefully you find a couple of gold nuggets. I never professed to be a golden nugget. Ever. Right? So, anyway, James, any questions, comments, anything like that pop up?
No, nothing new.
Okay, so something else I said earlier, right? This is not about weakness. I talked about compassion, that kind of thing, because people can confuse kindness with weakness, compassion with weakness, that kind of thing, right? But we're talking about compassion without weakness. Okay, it's important to understand distinctions. Okay, and that's why I started off describing compassion earlier, motivation, those kind of things, and they can seem kind of odd. But to understand NIN at this level, to understand this level of operation, we absolutely must. I have a one-on-one coaching student going through the warrior comeback system, and there was an exercise that I gave him, and I got to get it right. He was trying to be efficient. He was trying to not sound redundant, like he was listing the same things. But there's this exercise, and I said, don't filter, right? If you were creating your perfect life, right, what would absolutely not be a part of it? And just let your brain throw shit out, right? And so, but one of the things that popped up was I didn't list a bunch of things that came out because they were so similar to these other things that it was like I was just repeating myself. And so I read these things and I said, you got to be careful, because what sounds similar could be different in conditions that trigger it, outcomes produced, those kind of things, right? And I just touched base with him, and there's a part B to this exercise, but he trusts me, right? And that's important, right? For teachers to trust their students, or teachers to trust students, and students to trust their teachers. And so he went back and put a bunch of those things back in, and it started making sense, because when we're doing gross level thinking, when we're doing what might we call it, click whir kind of thinking, right? The thinking like the masses, this generalistic thinking, right? It sounds like we're being too particular. It sounds like we're being anal. It sounds like we're OCD or whatever, right? But in the upper levels, understanding distinctions could be the difference. When something, somebody look at it and go, oh, same difference. Now, are we talking about same difference, or are we talking about two things that are the same but different? What the hell is that? Well, my daughter has, what's your car? What's your Honda CRV. Okay, she has a Honda CRV, right? I have a Kia Cadenza, right? On the outside, they look completely different, okay? But they're both automobiles, okay? So if we're talking about automobiles, right, they're the same but different, okay? But we could be talking about two things that are different in the same way. Like, our cars are different in shape, but in function and whatnot, right? Just like if we were talking about human beings, she's a woman and I'm a man, right? So human beings, right? But right, there's this difference, right? Now, when we compare these two things, right? Outward manifestation, there's certain looks, build, whatever, right? Now we're talking about the same difference because it's the outward, right? So again, people just throw shit around. That's why they don't understand what's really going on, because they borrow these friggin' things, or they want to think generally. They don't want to do the work, okay? And understanding distinctions, right? This is huge, right? So again, this is important. And regarding my discussion on compassion and it having nothing to do with being nice, right? It could be nice and it could be something else. But what we're talking about when I avoid saying or even implying, I told you so, right? Is compassion without weakness. This isn't indulgence. I don't prevent consequences, right? I can't prevent your karma from playing out, right? I don't soften reality. This is cause and effect, and effects always match energy and action. And I don't shame afterwards. I don't have to, right? That's reality's and the universe's job, not mine, okay? My job is to stay present and steady, okay? We talked about this 2 episodes ago, right? That creates accountability without dependency, okay? Students are accountable for practicing the skills, learning the lessons, and integrating them into their lives, okay? Not developing a dependency on the teacher to always tell them what to do. Trin, you've done tests. Some of the other folks that are on have done tests with me, okay? Or in the dojo, right? I'll say, show me what you're working on. And they'll do this thing, right? And right in the middle of it, or right at the end of it, they'll look over at me for validation. And I'll either be nice, or I'll yell, or sometimes I say it through my gritted teeth because I keep fucking doing it, right? What the hell are you looking at me for, right? If you're ever attacked, I'm not going to be behind the Chevy in the goddamn parking lot yelling, hey, don't do your, right? Pick this kamae, right? Stop looking at the teacher after you've done it for validation. I see this in Japan all the time. People will be like training and stuff, and they'll look over to see if the teacher's watching. The hell is that? Right? If the teacher catches you doing something that you need corrected for or that you need help with, they'll let you know. Right? But if we're watching to see if the teacher's looking, or we're checking to see if we're doing it right, then we're not training to learn and integrate. We're acting out of a fear of being wrong, compliance, obedience, right? Or a need for validation. And none of those things lead to mastery. Okay? They lead to victimhood and being weak. Okay? So, again, this is not about anybody, right? These are things that I've had to go through. I'm still going through, right? I've told everybody, right? 2026 is my Fudo year again. I've been through Fudo several times. I'm going around the mandala again. This is at a different place. Okay? There are things that are still holding me back, and I need to cut those cords. I need to catch myself, and I need to stop letting those limitations and inhibitions and whatever get in the way, because they are still controlling me and they're still manipulating my decisions, my thoughts, right? Emotional states, all kinds of things. Okay? So, again, the point is accountability, right? Creating accountability without dependency. Okay? What I'm talking about is allowing a student to develop the right skills and not learn to follow someone else's script. Not looking for students to do it the way I would do it. I'm providing the tools and the lessons, the strategic thinking, the tactical insights and whatnot that the lineages have passed down. But we all end up applying this stuff, right? Based on our life, our unique circumstances, those kind of things, right? That doesn't mean you learn the lessons and then you do whatever the hell you want. We see that in martial arts all the time. People learn all the lessons and then they end up at the other end, jumping in the ring. I'll talk about that in a bit here. But jumping in the ring, and what you see is they've focused on 1 or 2 punches, 1 or 2 kicks, 1 or 2 trick moves that's their thing, right? And they've thrown 98.2% of the rest of the stuff away, right? You learn all this stuff and then you just, and then they end up putting their own spin on things. That's how American Taekwondo came out of traditional Taekwondo, right? People didn't want to do the traditional stances and fist positions and things like that, right? They liked boxing better, or street fighting better. So that's what you see. You see as a synthesis. Not knocking it. I'm just pointing out where it came from. Okay? But what I'm talking about here with not producing automatons and disciples, right? This is the difference between helping someone stand up and carrying them so they never have to, so they never want to, or so they never develop the need to grow legs of their own. A teacher's job is to help reshape someone so that they can do it for themselves, not to become a clone. This is where people get stuck, right? Because they think that growth into these levels means they're walking away from a teacher's lessons or whatever. But this is a level of insight and personalization that is born of everything the teacher gave you. It's not the same as, well, I don't like the way they teach, and I'm not buying that shit, or I think I can kick his ass, or whatever, and then they walk away. That's not the same. The most respectful thing we can do that we can give a teacher, like for me, with Hatsumi Sensei, the most respectful thing I can do is follow the lessons and do the work and grow into myself with these lessons, right? Not to become a disciple or a clone of Hatsumi Sensei. I can't do that. That's not even possible, right? One of my teachers said one time, in any generation there was only ever one Picasso, and Hatsumi Sensei is the Picasso. But that doesn't mean that you can't become a master painter in your own right. You're just never going to be a fucking Picasso. But the world only needs one, right? So don't be a Picasso. Be the you that's the master. But everybody's so fixated on being like, and they confuse having the knowledge and skills and ability that their teacher has and that a master has with becoming like that person. See, there's that same difference thing again. I can become like Hatsumi Sensei in skill and understanding and perspective, and not there yet. I'm working on it. But I can be that, right? I can be like that. And there's being like Hatsumi Sensei where I speak in fucking broken English and all I do is parrot back the spoken lessons or whatever. And the insight never develops to where I can use my own words. Because I understand the lesson. I'm not just regurgitating the lesson. I'm not just parroting the lesson. Okay? So, anyway. James, anything?
No, I don't see anything.
What do you got, Trin?
That last thing that you just said,
Yeah.
between regurgitating and embodying.
Yeah. James, can you hear her talking?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Of course, this is another paper I'm going to write, but that is what I find in academia the difference between a genius and a brilliant person is. A genius can follow the line of the information. A brilliant person can share it with the world.
Yeah. So, what I find interesting is Hatsumi Sensei has taught many things having to do with this very thing, right? But still, people do the whole. This is like one of those Bible things. And again, I'm not a religionist or whatever. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm just not. I don't even like using the term Buddhist because it immediately causes a divide, right? It's dualistic thinking. Anyone who's not, right? I don't like this kind of thing. But I am a well-read person. How about that, right? But there's that phrase, right? Many are called, but few are chosen. But I don't think this has anything to do with somebody standing at the end of anything and going, no, yes, no. This is a self-selection process. Okay? And we all self-select all the time based on our choices. And there's another phrase from one of I call him a correspondence course mentor, which means it's an author that I have read their deep stuff and whatnot, but we've never interacted in the same space and time kind of thing, but I've learned lessons. Okay. Richard Bach, he wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, One, There's No Such Place as Far Away, a bunch of stuff, really cool stuff, right? You know what? It slipped. I'll be back to it. But it's about that self-selection kind of thing, right? That we design our lives. There it is. We design our lives through the power of our choices. Okay. Have you ever gotten an email from me every once in a while at the bottom, right? My little closeout thing is in any moment, we are either exactly what we want to be or exactly what we've allowed ourselves to become, which is just another way of saying that with a couple of other kind of things that have to do with the choice. But we design our lives through the power of our choices. Every single moment, every choice we make. That's karma. Okay? Your karma is not mine to live. My karma is not yours to live. Right? If I teach a lesson and somebody takes it negatively, right, that's their karma, not mine. Which is why I don't apologize for lessons. Or when a student who has done other things, other martial arts or whatever, right? Even this one. And I'll teach something, they'll say, I never learned that. Or nobody ever taught me that, or whatever, right? Very often I'll say, not my fault. Would you just say, Trin? Not my fault, right? And it's not the disgruntled workers, not my job, not my whatever, not my fault, right? That shifting of the blame kind of thing. No, okay? It's not my karma, okay? But we can fix that right now. Because now you just learned the lesson. You can never say that ever again, that nobody taught you that. Now, if you were taught and you don't practice and therefore can't do when you need to do it, again, still not my fault, not my karma. Okay? And this goes back to that Fudo episode, okay, where we don't take on shit that's not ours to take on. Now, if I take on the responsibility of being a teacher for somebody, my job at that point is to teach the lessons correctly, at the level they need them, to that person, not confuse them, not overwhelm them, whatever, right? Not shame them, that kind of stuff, right? But that's where my job ends. My job is not to learn it for them. My job is not to make sure they practice and train. My job is not to force it down their throat. Oh God, I tried to do that for years. Not forcing things down people's throats, but I just kept repeating the lessons, and I kept, because it was important to me that they got the stuff. See, that's a fetter. That's a problem. Because I was running in circles, making their karma mine. Because it was that important for me to me that they got this stuff. My job is to faithfully teach. The student's job is to learn, do the work, and get to the level where they're ready for the next lesson. The problem here in the West is that everybody has come to believe that the teacher or the expert or the mentor or whatever is supposed to be a fucking drive-up window where they can come up and order whatever they want and come and go as they damn well please. And as long as it's mildly nutritious and fairly edible, then they can shove it down their throat and keep going on with their otherwise overly distracted and filled life, but there's no focus and there's just one distraction, one stimulation after another. And then when things stop, what do? Whip out their phone, start scrolling, or whatever, right? Because silence is it's painful. One of the first lessons I got from Reverend Jikai on the Mikkyo side was most people's problems start and end with their inability to sit naked alone in an empty room and do absolutely nothing. Ego will start talking to you, telling stories, seeing shapes in the wall, whatever, right? Because when you're in a condition like that, you're left with nothing but you and your ego. Okay? So this aligns with this Fudo thing, right? From the Fudo perspective, right? Remember that character that we talked about two episodes ago, right? 3 primary symbols on this character. There's a sword, and there's a rope, and there's the flames and whatnot, right? And this is where those distinctions have to come into play. Okay, because, in the beginning when we learn about Fudo, right, the sword cuts through illusions, that's external, the rope binds up internal delusions, those kind of things, right? And then the flames, that's about the passion to get it done, okay? But these things are all symbols, okay? In this case, the sword cuts delusion, right? My lessons to students, or if I leave them to reality. Okay, I support you in your belief system. Okay, let's see how that works out for you, right? Look, what have I told you? I told you so. Right? I mean, and sometimes in class I'll go, you guys are killing me. I'm going to show this one more time, and that's it. We're going to move on to the next thing. But I haven't gotten this right yet. Your job is not to get this right in class. Your job is to learn a lesson in class. Your job is to work this, right? Get together with training partners. Right? Anyway, so the sword cuts delusion, not dignity. Okay, this is why I say the lesson doesn't need agreement. Okay, we have another symbol that's actually on the kamiza. Right, it's a mirror. Okay, it's an unblemished mirror. There's no dings in it. There's no scratches, whatever. So it doesn't warp, whatever. Okay, the mirror shows reality, not judgment. The mirror doesn't judge what's in it, what's reflected in it. Okay? This is why I say that our lives are the litmus test of our belief systems, of our ideologies, right? Those kind of things. Because, again, we design our lives with the power of our choices. No matter how much we try to blame others, right? Okay? So, there's an old saying, the mountain doesn't mock the climber who slips. But it isn't going to catch him either. Okay? The climber's actions and plans and perceptions and whatnot. All right. So, quiet authority outlasts ego. Okay. And this last part I'm going to touch on this. The instructor who never says, I told you so, right, is the one whose warnings are remembered the longest. Because we don't need them to say, I told you so. Okay? As soon as we had that little failure, we take that shot to the face, or we forgot to move at the right angle, or we moved at an angle, but we avoided that incoming shot, but we left ourselves in range for something easy for the partner to do or whatever, right? And our uke's just standing right there, just smiling at us because, right, they know, we know, teacher, right? Okay. It's kind of like that saying in academia, right? When you take tests, right, you never forget the answers on the test that you got wrong. The rest of the shit could fade into obscurity, but...
Especially if you changed your answer.
What's that?
Especially if you changed your answer.
And see, that's a big thing in academia, too, because you're tested once, right? And unless it shows up on a final again, right, you get the right ones and the wrong ones. You're not taught a process of fixing it, relearning the wrong ones, right? But I mean, that's what we always appreciated when you were going to private school and some of your teachers had, let's say you had a spelling test on Friday, they had a Wednesday pre-test. And if you passed that one, you didn't have to take the other ones. You could, did you have the same teacher that Kelsey had where the teacher would open a book of bonus words and you could learn those and take those on Friday? And if you got them wrong, no harm, no foul to your grade because you got that on Wednesday. But if you got them right, you got bonus points. So you could make up other things. And the words were like ginormous things, like dinosaur names and shit like that, right? And so that motivates the student to excel instead of it being a pass or fail. So the Wednesday pre-test for the kids who didn't pass it, or they could choose to take the test again on Friday, but that gave them a couple more days to practice the ones they were getting wrong, right? But see, when I help Trin and Kelsey, when I helped them with their spelling things, we would do it on the way to school, on the way home from school, or just driving around. And I'd pop these words out. And so we would just do it by process of elimination. If they got the word right, I might ask them again at some point. But if they got the word wrong, that just went into a little mental list. And I would ask again and again and again. And eventually they got all the words right because we focused more on the ones they were getting wrong than the ones they were getting right. But this isn't how people practice, is it? They practice the shit they do right more often than they practice the stuff they do wrong. Because ego doesn't like to be wrong, so it protects us from that icky feeling of being wrong. But doing it right, see, there's the dopamine rush. Right? What we should be trying to get rid of is the cortisol flooding of the system. That's the stress hormone, right? That keeps us in a fight or flight mode. Anyway, one more time, James. Questions, comments?
No, still nothing.
All right. Well, do we have people even on?
Says we do.
What's that?
It says we do.
All right, fair enough. All right. So let me come at this a different way, right? I have this little metaphor, I guess, kind of an analogy. I often describe this shift to the Ura side of Nin using, it's a rather simple metaphor, right? So imagine the mind as a boat on the ocean, okay? On the surface, that boat on the surface, right? Weather dictates everything. Okay? So how do we be more Fudo-like? How do we get to this level of Nin where we're not surviving? We're not just getting through. It's not about struggle, right? Right? In the statuary and the imagery of Fudo, right? Fans are flame, the rocks are but he's standing upright. He's not being blown. He's not holding a hat tighter. He's not, struggling with an overcoat or whatever, right? Flames aren't extinguished, right? Okay, but weather dictates everything, right? Calm seas feel calm, storms feel chaotic, whatever, right? So now, imagine that boat is a submarine. It can still be on the surface, but if it's on the surface, it's at the whim of the weather, right? This is just like us living at surface level, like everybody else. Whatever's going on in our life dictates our emotional state, dictates our ability to focus, dictates everything. Okay? But that submarine has an ability to submerge, right? So on the surface, it's whatever's going on ocean-wise, right? The surface of the ocean, right? That boat has to put up with. But just below the surface, it's a different experience, right? The surface of the ocean's still moving, right? So there's still turbulence, but the turbulence is reduced. Deeper still, the waves barely register. And at a sufficient depth, right? The ocean above, right? That surface can be frickin' just a raging storm. But everything below remains steady. can't even feel it. Okay? We know it's going on, but we're not being thrown around by it. We're not being jostled at all. At a certain depth in the ocean, everything feels the same. Okay? So this is not about the boat leaving the ocean. This is not about blaming the ocean. This is not about wishing the ocean were different. This is not wishing that the weather wasn't what it was, right? This is same ocean, same storm, different experience. Okay? Nin matures by going deeper, not higher. I think that's a bad translation. Higher rank, higher ability, that kind of thing. No. Deeper integration. Deeper understanding. Deeper commitment. We say things like that too. Okay? This is why mastery often looks like doing less. Okay? It isn't detachment. It isn't avoiding, right? It's perspective. And that's why, in the little thing I talked about before we officially started the episode, what I was talking about was watching Hatsumi Sensei over the years just drop more and more. It wasn't a process of doing more. In most martial arts that I was in before this one, I would say virtually all of them, right? The higher levels and the master and whatnot did more. There was trickiness, there was like higher kicks, there were like more complicated kind of things and whatnot. But that's not what I saw from Hatsumi Sensei. It's not what I see from the master teachers. Unless they're teaching like Shoden level stuff at that level, right? The abilities, right? They move around from Shizen. They light touches. They're doing less, but producing way more in the way of results. But they, even when they're making corrections, they just look over, right? No. Yeah. Okay, good. Right? They're not disturbed as much, whatever. Okay? And I truly believe it's not that they're like holding it in, right? Which is, again, still some things I have to work on, right? Because sometimes in class, man, you guys are killing me, right? But they teach the lesson, and then they watch to see who's doing the work or who's looking for validation, who's looking for acknowledgement, who's covering up crappy taijutsu with their own little tricky moves, right? Because there's a need to win. There's a need to avoid losing or looking bad or whatever, right? So again, it's this perspective, right? It's also why people who want to just copy Hatsumi Sensei or any of these master teachers, right? They want to copy the movements, right? They want to look like without going through the same process, right? And these people will never, not an absolutist, but they will never attain real mastery. Because their process is to be imitators, not integrators. Okay. So before I talk about the Tatsujin, this is the kind of the culmination here, right? I want to talk about this level. This it's not a level. This. And I don't like using the word attainment either, because it sounds like we got something, right? As opposed to embodying something. So before I jump into this, kind of wrap things up, James, questions, comments, complaints? I've got broad shoulders, see?
No, I still don't see anything.
All right, sound is still good?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. All right. Those damn Koga ninjas, stop messing around with the technology. I haven't used that phrase in a long time. All right. So when we talk about the Tatsujin, right, what we're actually going to be talking about is what mastery actually means. Okay, we've been talking about an aspect of it, this NIN, and how it gets us there. what that looks like at different levels. Because what I'm talking about right now, what I've been talking about, is Ninpo, not Ninjutsu, not Budo-Taijutsu. Right? I'll get back to that in a minute. But so we're here at this word Tatsujin, right? I've taught on this before, right? So for those of you who know, right, treat this like a review, right? While I get the new folks caught up with the short version. Okay. So historically, Tatsujin, right? This title, name, reference, right, referred to a person who had penetrated the essence of an art, right? During certain eras, it was often used for sword masters, right? But never just technicians, right? Never just those who were good at mechanics, right? The kanji used to write the word tatsujin implies more than skill, right? These two kanji imply attainment through understanding, not repetition or collection or whatever alone. Okay, so you can look these kanji up, right? They're rather simple, right? So tatsu, the first kanji, tatsu, right? The core meanings of this means things like to reach, to arrive, to attain, to penetrate or get through, and also to be accomplished. Okay, so the implication of that kanji, right, what it implies, and this is important, right? This is not about effort or struggle, right? It implies having arrived at understanding through integration. I know, I've used that word several times already, okay? Tatsu is the point where, one, skill no longer requires conscious thought. Mushin, right? Jen, I think you covered that in the previous thing, right? Okay. 2, movement, timing, and decision arise naturally. Not pre-planned and then hoping that shit works out. Not woulda, coulda, should've, whatever. Okay. And 3, one reaches through complexity rather than forcing outcomes, right? The system is stressed more and more by complexity, right? To make sure that we're doing it, right? One of the things that we do, there's a first level, it's not even a sparring, it's a randori exercise that I do with students. I call it the circle of confidence. Trin just chuckled, right? So each student takes a turn being in the middle, kind of being the monkey in the middle, right? Then everybody on the outside takes a turn going in. And again, this is a mod 1 level exercise, right? So they've learned kamae, okay? All of my randori and quote unquote sparring drills come on the tail end of learning something. And so now it's a testing. So the learning of something is on the wisdom side of the mandala. The drills test it to make sure the student can do it as it should be done, under pressure and with increasing levels of pressure. So just because it's a level 1 or module 1 exercise doesn't mean that green belts or mod 3 nidans, whatever, don't do it. There's a difference. Same exercise, different pressure. Okay? So each one takes a turn coming in, right, and throwing a single attack. Could be a punch, could be a grab, could be a kick, whatever they want to do. Doesn't have to be taijutsu either, right? If I go in, chances are I'm doing a spinning back kick or I'm doing something from some other art because everybody else comes in and does a simple whatever. I might come in looking like a boxer, I'm whatever, okay? So what we're really testing the student, the first level students are testing their ability to watch the attack that comes so they can move to the correct angle, incorrect kamae, to jam the attacker's ability to do the next one as easy, right? And what they're testing is their reflexive ability to go to kamae correct angle, that kind of thing. What's in muscle memory? Okay. And because there's only one attack, then they only have to, and usually what we do is we start people off with the attack will come from the rear side, right? It takes longer to get there. And then the other factor to this, because everybody that's in class could be different levels, okay? So everybody's instructed that your speed and intensity of your attack will match the belt color of the student in the middle. So in Nidan, that attack is coming at full speed. Lower, it's coming lower, right? Somebody in mod 1, white, yellow, yellow, black, right? That those first couple of levels, right? It's coming at quarter of full speed, right? Intermediates, half, upper intermediates, 3/4, right? By Shodan Nidan, it's coming at full speed, okay? So the pressure increases, right? The intensity increases, but the skill set that they're testing, what's being tested is their ability to do it correctly under increasing pressure. Not to throw shit to the wind and hope for the best. Okay? So anyway, back to this Tatsujin, right? In classical usage, right, this term, this tatsu, often implies fluency and unobstructed function, right? Not just technical competence, okay? And there's a lot more to it. I already said it was about going to kamae and hitting the right angle, but there's mental things, right? Can the student watch? Can they maintain distance and whatnot? So the attack has to come, right, with the attacker at a disadvantage, right? And of course that gets better at higher levels with more experience, right? But as that gets better, we apply more pressure. Okay, so it's not just a freaking sparring, do whatever you want. Randori is very specifically testing certain internal and external, mental and physical and emotional skill sets that are required for mastery, for controlling bad situations. And what ends up happening over time is something in science called stress inoculation. It just doesn't bother you as much. There's no emotional spike, right? The cortisol and dopamine are not, it's another part of your day. But it's not boring because you're actively controlling these things. You're actively watching for, maintaining, controlling their decisions with the kamae that you choose before they even throw anything. So how they throw it and what they throw, right there, you're eliminating their options. That's the advantage. It's not boring. It actually becomes fun and playful. Okay? So that's tatsu, right? And then jin, most people just translate jin superficially as person, right? But jin can mean person. It can mean human being, but it can also mean one who embodies. Okay, so the implication here, right, again, really important. This is not a title or rank or just, a matter of being born as a human being, right? So you're a person, right? This is a designation, or it designates a state of being, not a position or a matter of existence, right? Jin tells us the mastery is lived, not possessed, right? It shows up in conduct, in judgment, in restraint, and in response. Okay, the person themselves has become the expression of the art. Well, you often hear me describe it as a walking, talking, living expression of the art. For those of you who are in Mikkyo, it's nirmanakaya. Okay, it is a state of consciousness, intentional being in and appropriate to the moment. Okay? So the combined meaning of Tatsujin, right? A person who has fully arrived at embodied mastery. It's not a rank. It's not a reputation, right? Okay. It's not a collector of techniques. I got more than you have, so I'm a better master than you are, right? It's not a specialist obsessed with difficulty. right? It's not a performer chasing validation, okay? And it's not a title of distinction or reputation. Other people might call somebody a master, right? But a master doesn't call himself a master, okay? But, right, while it's not those things, it is someone whose understanding is so integrated it appears simple, okay? It is someone whose actions solve problems before conflict escalates. It is someone whose presence reduces friction rather than creates it. Just merely walk into a room, right? People calm down. Either they calm down because they feel comfortable and safe, or they calm down because there's something about the person who walks in the room that unsettles that person, and they don't feel like they had the advantage they had when they were barking like a damn dog a moment before. Okay? And it's also someone who doesn't look like someone others would think of as a master. Which is why barking dogs make all kinds of comments and shit like that about Hatsumi Sensei and how the Bujinkan's fake and all that kind of shit, because their focus is on toughness and that side of what they perceive warriors to be. And so since that's not what Hatsumi Sensei looks like, and since our techniques look slow and soft and whatnot, then they can't possibly be effective and stuff like that. That is fucking perfect. Because a true master doesn't have a target on his back. The tough guy master, always. Somebody's always looking to play king of the hill with this asshole and knock him off the hill so they can be king of the hill. Okay? So a key distinction here, right, is that a Tatsujin is not defined by how hard things feel, how much they endure, how intense their training looks, right? But a Tatsujin is defined by what no longer needs to be done, what problems never fully form, and how little effort is required to restore balance. Okay? And this is why Tatsujin aligns with Ninpo at the Jonin level, not with gaining toughness or chunin cleverness alone. Right? Okay. But it's not, again, it aligns with, but there's something more to this. Okay? A Tatsujin at the highest level of Ninpo is a fully integrated human being, one who has access to all human faculties, yet is no longer compelled to overuse or identify with any one of them. Okay? A Tatsujin is not someone who knows more techniques. A Tatsujin is someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Okay? This is where the difference between Ninpo Ninjutsu and Ninpo or Budo-Taijutsu becomes clear. Okay? Geinin level, right? Geinin learn actions and they carry out missions, right? They do shit. Okay? Chunin learns systems. They see connections and they translate vision into plans. Jonin understand causality. Jonin focuses on the aim, the vision, right? The long game, right? No quick fulfillment kind of things, right? But Tatsujin lives above all these lanes entirely, right? They're not bound to a fixed realm, to a fixed role, or a fixed response. They choose, okay? And a Tatsujin can move between the roles, the levels, and fit the circumstances as needed because they're not trapped to any one of them. Okay? Can do Jonin level thinking when that's what's necessary. Can do Chunin level control, planning, manipulation when that's necessary. And they can do physical things when that's necessary. Okay? Again, they have choice. This is the freedom that people often get lost in because they confuse that freedom or that nothingness state, right? Because we've been taught since childhood that you're either this or that, right? Certain types of people do these things, not these things, right? And so we lose the ability to be able to have the flexibility and the ability to be what's needed in any given moment. Because we've been taught that, like, once you choose one thing, you can't be anything else, right? And then everything just gets jammed up and stuck, right? So how does this fit Ninpo specifically? Okay? At the Jonin, at the Ninpo level, mastery is not endurance like the Geinin has to deal with it, right? That endurance, that putting up with hardship, that kind of thing, right? It's also not clever manipulation, right? That Chunin level kind of stuff, right? It's also not the fire truck that just went by and right? But at this level, it is prevention, non-escalation, and ending cycles before participation, right? Even our own habitual things, right? In Mikkyo, we would say that by paying attention, right, and not just habitually doing the same thing the same way all the time, right? We're not stuck, right? So at the moment of decision, we assess, and then we choose that which will produce the better outcome. Not just, I have to do that because I have no other choice. If I don't do that, I feel like shit. I feel like this. I feel like. Okay, well, okay. But, right. So I can't not do these things. I can't not produce that outcome because at this point here, I have no choice. Well, that sucks. Because someone who has no choice, well, technically, just like Trin said, they're dead. But if what they're really saying is that they don't have any, it's not that they don't have a choice, they only have one. And somebody who has only one choice is a slave. Okay, in this case, they're a slave to their own impulses, right? So a Tatsujin does not display mastery. He or she removes the conditions that would require it. Right? I know, this is an interesting episode, right? Okay. So this is why the highest expression of NIN, right? This is why the master teachers, this is why Hatsumi Sensei, right? This is why at this level, NIN often looks calm, boring, minimal, unremarkable. Like, see, Sensei, you just don't understand, man, because, like, you know, your life is different. And no. My life is no different than anybody else's. Hatsumi Sensei's life is no different than anybody else's. Hatsumi Sensei is dealing with old age, illness, and death. Okay? Just like we all will be, right? Family, money concerns, bills, shit going on in the world, political decisions, all kinds of things, right? Life is no different. What's different is our perspective and the way we look at things that causes us to operate differently. Okay? So it is not true that, Sensei, you just don't understand. The problem with the understanding is not with the teacher. Okay? So it looks boring. It looks like nothing's going on, right? It looks like this person doesn't have any problems. It looks simple, right? But this is also why people addicted to struggle don't recognize it. It's why they're not attracted to it. It's why they're not interested in it. Right? Or why they completely misread it. Right? It looks normal. But it has more control, more perception, more ability than can be imagined by those looking for what everyone thinks power and mastery is supposed to look like. It can't be seen because the filter that's being looked through to try to understand it It's not tuned. Not tuned for that, because everybody thinks mastery and power looks like the person can do so much more, because that's the, right? So anyway, all right, getting to the end here. I'm just going to keep on going, right? So if you've ever heard, there's this phrase, I'll get to this in a minute, but a lot of people confuse hard training with useful training. Okay, they believe pressure alone creates skill. Okay, but we teach the skill and then we apply pressure to test the skill. Pressure doesn't create the skill. Pressure tests the skill. Okay, people think that they need to train fast and hard or fast and strong. But the reality is, based on the way our systems are built, when the amygdala fires and sends the message to the hypothalamus and drops the system into fight, flight, or freeze, you will be as fast and you will be as strong as you can possibly be. So you don't need to train for speed and strength, right? You train for timing, rhythm, reaction speed, like those kind of things, right? You train for alignment of body systems and proper extension or point of contact and whatnot, so that you're in a stronger position. You learn how to do indirect engagement, not direct engagement, so that your body is always in a position of strength, and he's always forced to work from a position of weakness, regardless of how strong his muscles are related to how strong your muscles are. Okay, so pressure alone. This is, right? Again, people believe in hard training, right? They believe pressure alone creates skill. They believe that speed alone reveals truth, right? That fighting proves effectiveness. Somebody can win a fucking fight. Excuse my language there, YouTube. They can win a fight and not be effective. They could have just landed a lucky shot, right? But if we're counting wins and losses, okay? But beyond a certain threshold, pressure doesn't refine, it collapses, okay? Just like these folks, right? We've all heard the story, right? You want to test your stuff, you stop talking that bullshit, you put gloves on, get in the ring, right? Because the ring is the only place to really test your skills. Is bullshit. Okay? And I'm going back to science. This is not opinion. This is not me arguing, how we do things against like everybody else because I need to be right. Again, it's not about being right. This is science. The nervous system defaults to what's already there, right? Which is why ring-based thinking produces brute force fighters, not strategic survivors. Okay? Real NIN training increases speed and pressure only after structure is stable. You're able to go faster or stronger or operate within greater levels of pressure because things are operating correctly. You don't make things operate correctly by pounding on them to make them something they're not, right? So, and the point here is not to win. It's not to win. This is where people get this wrong, and it's where they're focused on fighter mentality, right? And not Ninpo mentality. Okay? When we apply pressure and when we're doing these things, right? Even a defender, right? In a bad situation. So the focus isn't to win. Okay? It's to control intent, to control space, and to control outcome. That's not fighting. That's conflict resolution under constraint. Right? The difference between sparring and controlled randori training, right? Speed limitation and system habituation is the difference here, right? We do increase speed and pressure, but in a way that allows the student to stay focused and actually test skills and stay focused on defender, not fighter mentality. The focus isn't on winning. It's on maintaining kamae, maintaining structure, maintaining freedom of movement, controlling space, controlling his attack angles and options, right? Based on the kamae that we choose, those kind of things, right? It's not on winning or losing. The advantage is created and maintained because certain things are prioritized and controlled. It's not on hitting him harder and just ending up winning. It's if I control these things, right? He can't do what he needs to do. And it's about ending the problem, right? It's about situational resolution, conflict resolution, not about winning or losing. Ego thinks in terms of winning and losing. Okay? So, anyway, I talked about some other things and whatnot. I'm going to skip over some notes here because we're way over here, right? So, anyway, just to kind of recap things, right? This is the end of this 3-episode synthesis, right? This episode completes this 3-part arc, right, that we've been exploring. Episode 1, that was episode 288 for those of you who are kind of jumping in midway or whatever, right? Episode 1 was about NIN as survival. Okay. Episode 2, right? Episode 289, we looked at NIN as strategic endurance, right? And then this one, this final episode, NIN as mastery. Okay. Together, they trace the full transformation from doing to refining to releasing. Right? And I think this is why this is the right place to end the year. Because mastery isn't accumulation. It's clarity. Okay? So I'll open this up to questions and comments here in just a minute. But what I do want to do is, I know we're talking about the end of something, but let's look forward, okay? Because next week, right, that's January 5th of 2026, right? That's the first episode of next year, right? So in our next episode, right, the New Year kickoff episode, right, we're going to be exploring a very common phrase that's used in Japan during the first week of and after New Year's, which is Akimashite omedetou gozaimasu, right? To most people, and the way it's generally converted into English, it's translated as Happy New Year. But nothing in here is the word happy, New Year, anything like that, right? There's a term for congratulations, right? There's a kind of an honorific kind of thing there, gozaimasu, right? But it's that akimashite that I want to look at, right? But we're going to look at this not as a greeting. I'll talk about it a little bit, right? But not as a greeting, but as a principle, okay? Take a look at its symbols, its timing, right? And how the new year in Japanese culture is about opening, not starting, okay? So until then, right, of course, I want you to train deeply, right? Choose wisely. Remember, real nin doesn't resist the storm. Okay? It has the abilities and whatnot to move beneath it, right? To navigate it in a way where it's not shaken by it. It's not fearing the storm. It's not trying to weather the storm, right? The storm goes on. Okay? But at this level, Fudo's sword and rope and whatnot are turned inwardly, not outwardly. Because this is not about blame. This is not about trying to change the world and whatnot so that we'll be okay. It's about being okay regardless of the way the fucking world is operating, regardless of what's going on. Okay? To be what we are because of conditions makes us a slave to those conditions, and we'll never have ground. Okay? want to create the world that, or the life you want to live, then you got to cut the things that are controlling everybody else. And most of them are on the inside, not on the outside. There'll always be people trying to bully you or control you. But it's how we relate to them, and it's how we operate, and it's mostly about how we operate with ourselves that make the difference. Okay, so I know, we're all aiming for certain things. Okay, some are just going to jump ship long before because, as I've always said, this is too much hard work. But swords are not made by rubbing two sticks together and making a wish over, rainbows and unicorn farts. Okay? The metal is heated and pounded, and it's the process, right? And it's the natural one. To avoid the roughness is to avoid having the system need to adapt to where those things are no longer problems. Okay. All right, James, what do we have? Last minute questions, comments?
Just Dave said that we design our own clothing line and make Tatsujin jeans.
I missed that. Hold on one second. There's something. My speakers are not. Okay, say that again.
Dave said if we design our own clothing line, we can make Tatsujin jeans.
I think I got that. What's that?
Dave.
Trinity's over here shaking her head, and she just stalled, and then she just said, Dave.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. What else?
And the other thing is over on YouTube. FSM Tower. Just a brilliant show.
Let's keep me away from the brilliance, okay? So I'm just the conveyor of the lessons, right? So as with any work in the art, right? If you got lost in some of this, if it was confusing or whatever, that's natural. Okay, this is just like my guys were working through Mikkyo, and most of them we refer to mandala things and whatnot, but they're not actually moving through the mandala. But the confusion is the start, right? Because if we I'm not going to use the word bathe, but it's like that, right? If we stay in it, the system is forced to figure it out. Okay? If we go looking for an easy answer, we didn't just relieve the problem. We cheated ourselves, not up here, right? But here, right? Of the need to work it out, to actually integrate it into our system, right? Because being told the answer, we're just going to memorize it so we can repeat it and sound like we know. Okay. So anyway, the point here is to do things to the point where you don't need to think about them. This is not about accumulating things. This is about integrating this stuff into our systems, so much so that it becomes so much a part of who we are that we can't not do them. If we still have to remember where to put our foot when we're taking up a kamae, we don't know the kamae. Okay? We use the word I know it because I've seen it, and I've learned where things are supposed to be, and I can duplicate it. Knowing is somebody can startle you and your body pops into something that is 80-90% on, because under pressure, without the left brain issuing orders, the system knows where to go. That, right? When Shai Sensei or other teachers, right, do something, come out of a roll or whatever. I remember the first time Shai Sensei said this, came out of a roll, and he was standing right in front of me, this big old smiling face. And he goes, "Oh, Jeff Sensei, I think you're a master of ukemi." And I said, "Really?" Because I'm still working on this thing. He goes, "I think so." And then he smiles and he goes, "Well, I hope so anyway." And he walks off laughing, right? But it was just one of those things where I think what he saw was, it was just something that it was something I enjoyed, right? I didn't have to think about rolling. I didn't fear the ground, those kind of things, right? Because I fucking rolled all the time. It was just this thing that did I take to it because I liked it? No, I took to it because my teacher said I had to get it right, right? We're going to be throwing you around. The ground's going to hurt, right? I highly recommend that you get good at these things, right? But that's the same thing with anything else. When you can do it, when the ground is rushing up and half your brain is going, "Ah, shit," and another part of your brain might even be doubting that you can do it, right? And next thing you know, you're coming out of a roll and standing up, right? And still perplexed, like, "Motherfucker, like, you didn't tell me you were going to throw me that hard," whatever, right? And never gave the roll any thought. It just like happened, right? It was like a blip in time that you just ignored. With anything, kamae, whatever, that's integration. That is so much into your system, brain wiring, muscle memory. It's that you can't not do it. That integration, that NIN, right? That's mastery of that thing. But we don't become a master. We master perception. We master Zanshin awareness. We master assessment and prioritization. We master rolling. We master kamae. We master spatial relationships and control and perception. Those kind of things, right? It's on the mandala, right? You don't this central figure that is this enlightened kind of thing. No. That forms. We can't work on that directly, so we work on discernment. We work on upaya, or skillful means. We work on perception and assessment and those kind of things, right? And that together, like all of these things that get added in, make this thing what it is. Okay, the lack of them, that's the opposite, right? So we're all at a level where we are, and that's cool, right? The reason for Kuden and the reason that we do this thing, the reason I do this thing, the reason James helps out on a regular basis is to give you markers and anchor points and places to focus. Okay? And the other reason is to break the addictive need to keep collecting techniques as though the techniques themselves define mastery. The techniques are important. More important is understanding the principles and concepts that created them and being able to do it on your own. Okay? And to correctly align our perception with what this art's supposed to be about. Okay? Could we end up fighting for our lives? Yeah, but it's still not a fight the way most people think of. But as long as we're trapped in that kind of mentality, then this will never be, one, what we think it is, because it can't be. It wasn't designed that way. And two, we can never be that which we might be aiming for, because we can't get there from a misguided perception about the path itself. That's why I created Ninja no Hachimon and Ninja Mind and those kind of things, because they're self-guided pathways to make sure that we're clear about the path and we're working on the things that produce the outcome that the art promises. Okay? Not my opinion. James, anything else? If it's from Dave, don't tell me. No, I'm kidding.
No, that's anything.
All right, cool. Guys, thank you very much for a interesting year, for as much or as little as you've been a part of it. James, as always, I couldn't do this. I mean, I get it done when you're ill or and James doesn't take vacations any more than I do. So if we're not around, it's because, like, his wife forced him to take one, or I don't know, the universe decided, I think you need an illness, that kind of thing. But, anyway, so, but I couldn't do this on a regular basis without him doing what he does as well. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next time we meet, class-wise or Kuden-wise or whatever, it'll be 2026. And we'll just keep on doing what we do. All right. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. Gokurasama deshita. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time. On what trend?
On Kuden.
On Kuden. Get more of Kuden Radio. Subscribe through your favorite podcasting site or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.